Hello guys, I wanted to speak with you today about last night's Tucker Carlson. I know I've been talking about Tucker quite a bit lately, but he continues to impress me in interesting ways. Primarily the fact that he is one of, if not the only person out there who is listening to the forgotten left, the progressives, news sources that haven't lost their real ideals and aren't mired in political theater and identity politics, anti-war voices, anti-censorship voices, free. This type is what you could call the forgotten left. Your ACLU left, or at least what remains of the ACLU post-Trump. So Glen Greenwald of The Intercept was on Tucker Carlson just last night. Now, Glen Greenwald, who is no longer with The Intercept, he founded The Intercept, and then they've since parted ways. I think he was let go. I can't remember, but they've had a growing rift in the direction of The Intercept. But he's done. I think his claim to fame, Glen Greenwald, was his time as a journalist in Brazil, covering a variety of subjects. I assume mostly political corruption, but I'm kind of talking out of my ass. I don't know exactly what he covered in Brazil, but I know he spent a good number of years as a journalist in Brazil. And he's one of the few reporters that, especially as like an on-field reporter, who does great work. And Tucker Carlson had him on last night, and let's see, what they discussed was primarily the subject of Facebook censoring and silencing disease experts who stray from the understood narrative, from the official narrative, any disease expert or doctor who has said something controversial or what Facebook deems to be misinformation and going against the common knowledge of the virus, what kind of common knowledge there is. These doctors and disease experts have been censored or deplatformed from Facebook for spreading information that Facebook deems unacceptable and misinformation. And so Glen Greenwald started by talking a little bit about that and how wrong that is, and how oftentimes disease experts can be incredibly wrong early on. He mentioned how at the beginning of the virus, they said that at this time a year ago, at the beginning of the coronavirus outbreak in the United States, disease experts such as Dr. Fauci, that's the guy. He came out. He said that there wasn't enough vaccines. I mean, he said that wearing a mask wasn't going to protect anybody, and it had nothing to do with. It wasn't necessary for day-to-day activities, and that people shouldn't be buying up masks for that purpose. This was at the beginning of the pandemic when we didn't really know what to expect, and Dr. Fauci has since been considered. He's been considered to be having spread misinformation in that regard. In order to, I'm not saying Dr. Fauci's heart wasn't in the right, that he wasn't thinking about this in a rational way, where he thought, well, disease experts, people in healthcare and essential services need these masks. We have to take that. We have to make sure that the people who need them get them. And so he took that away, or he basically lied or misled the American public in that regard, and all he really and so he didn't think that it was appropriate. He didn't think the best solution was just to be honest with people and tell them, yes, this disease is deadly, but we ask that at this time when we have short supplies that we need to secure. There were other ways to go about making sure and securing masks for the general public. Otherwise, otherwise Tucker pressed him. Tucker asked Glen Greenwald a very good question about why social media and tech giants believe that they need to do this. What's their agenda? Why are they motivated to crack down in such an authoritarian, undemocratic way? And Glen Greenwald said, well, it's not them. They'd much rather prefer not to do this, that this is contradictory to their business model, that their behavior is dangerous to their own survival, that companies like Facebook and Twitter are doing an incredible amount of damage to themselves, their reputation, at a time like this. And Glen Greenwald goes on to say that it comes down to mainstream news sources and established long-term legacy news and journalists who have seen Facebook and YouTube and Twitter as threats, these outside forms of communication and news, ways of people receiving their information that are not news from mainstream sources, and it costs them viewers and ad revenue, and they want to. I mean, trust me that when the New York Times criticizes Facebook or YouTube, it's out of desperation and fear of their inadequacy and their obsolescence, and that's what Glen Greenwald was basically saying, is that these social media websites would love to avoid this kind of thing, but because they're constantly being targeted by more established, more real news sources, like places like CNN and the Washington Post and the New York Times and places like that. That's basically, they're the ones who are putting that pressure on. So I will just say that this isn't even the first time that Glen Greenwald has been on to talk with Tucker Carlson before. And just a few days earlier, I think it was late last week, Tucker had Sagar and Jetty, he has this show called Rising on the Hill with Crystal and Sagar. They are a progressive. They are progressives. They have largely been supportive of figures like Bernie Sanders and pretty much just as critical of the Democrats as the Republicans. So naturally, Tucker has had him on, which is another. He's another figure which is not going to be getting much mainstream news recognition, and Tucker Carlson, I secretly suspect, supports a lot. I mean, well, I don't so secretly suspect it. I do suspect that Tucker has some sentiment and has a soft spot for people who are fighting for the people and fighting against corruption, fighting against censorship from the left and the right, and it's not just a one and done coincidence with Jimmy Dore. Tucker Carlson has had figures such as Glen Greenwald on now several times, and Sagar and Jetty, and the only other news source that I've known, the only other personality on TV that I've known to have any of those figures was Glen Greenwald made an appearance sometime within, I think earlier, like maybe a year ago, with Brian Stelter, which I've spoken on about before, and they had a short discussion about the importance of backing up of the importance of fact checking from a news source, the importance of like CNN doing their own fact checking and not relying on a third party source. I believe that was the gist of their conversation on CNN. But anyway, to summarize, it's another great example of why Tucker Carlson has become the de facto platform for some of the best progressive voices in the country right now. How Tucker has extended with open arms these news sources who are just as against the right as they are the left, but Tucker seems to find that the enemy of my enemy is my friend may apply here, and he seems to have problems with, or at least sees the benefit and the niche market of reaching out to people who have this message. He obviously sees the immense popularity of populism and social democratic values. So he's embracing it, and it's not like this. People criticize people like Jimmy Dore, Glen Greenwald, Sager, and Jetty for going on Fox News at all. And a lot of people on the left refuse to even touch Fox News. But when you have sources, when you have CNN and MSNBC and other left-wing outlets who refuse to cover their most, they refuse to cover progressive voices, then of course, how they're going to get their voice heard, they're going to reach out they're going to reach out to any platform that'll have them. And if Tucker Carlson has welcomed them in, so if left-wingers and left-wing news hates that Tucker Carlson is where these people are going, then they should start welcoming him in. If all that MSNBC would have to do to ensure that progressive voices aren't going to Fox News and Tucker Carlson is to welcome them into their show and let them in and let them discuss the corruption and the problems that they want to discuss. So it's really not complicated. If you want progressive voices to stop running to the right to have their message heard, then why don't you on the left start welcoming them back in and stop alienating them? So, all right. Well, thank you for listening, guys.